everybody. I am Christiana Limniadis. I'm Director of Preservation Services for Preservation Buffalo Niagara. Thank you so very much for being with us here tonight. It is a beautiful Friday afternoon, and I'm just completely in awe that there are so many of you here willing to sit in front of a screen listening to me gab about Lustrons for the next little bit of time. So thank you so very much. Tonight is our final lecture series, our final lecture as part of Modern WNY 2020. This is our annual celebration of all things modern here in Western New York. In addition to tonight's lecture, we had two previous lectures, which if you missed, sadly, you can find them on our Facebook page. So we are here on Zoom with a bunch of you. For those of you here on Zoom, as the screen says, please make sure that your microphone and camera stay turned off for the presentation so we can all focus on that information and take that in. If you do have questions, which I want you to have questions and you should have questions, you can use that chat function, and my coworker Tia is here to catch all those questions and make sure I get them. We're also live streaming tonight onto Facebook, so hello to everybody who stumbles across us on Facebook. You're more than welcome to put questions in the comments on Facebook too, and we'll get those questions answered. So yeah, let's get started talking about Lustrons. How about that? Before we get moving on Lustrons, let us introduce you to Preservation Buffalo Niagara. If you are new, we are your local preservation advocacy organization. Our mission is to identify, protect, and promote the unique architecture and historic legacy and connect people to the places they love in Western New York. Our name has Buffalo and Niagara in it, but our service area is much broader than that. We provide services to the 5 westernmost counties in New York State. So that is a very large service area with a very large mission. So how do we accomplish that mission? We tend to divide our work into 4 main categories: education, technical service, advocacy, and community development. Education, tonight is an example of education, giving you that background and information so that you can better understand your built environment and then be better prepared to advocate for it. Technical service, if you have a question about a historic resource, you can pick up the phone. These days, email's a little bit better, and ask us that question. It can be a materiality question. It can be, how do I fix something or repair something? Or it could be a preservation planning question. So how do I fill out an application to get tax credits? How do I nominate my building to be a local landmark or on the National Register? And then with advocacy and community development, they are basically the same thing. The difference is that with advocacy, we are taking the lead on advocating for a resource or a new historic district or legislation that would support preservation work. And community development is where we come into your community and give you the tools and information you need to be in charge of your own preservation destiny. Again, we have a large service area. We have 5 counties. We can't be everywhere at once. And especially now in the state of a pandemic, we really can't be in your community in the way we could have before. So making sure that you have everything you need to fight those preservation battles is really, really important to us. And when I say us, I mean all of these bright smiling faces. Our executive director is Jesse Fisher. Mary, Tia, and Tabitha and Bridge round out the group. And Tia right here in the black shirt, Tia is the one who is moderating for us tonight. All right. Oh, you saying hello?
Yes, hello, I exist. I'm here to read your questions. Okay, you may continue.
Thank you. So we are here tonight about Lustron houses, the fabulous world of Lustron houses. Lustrons are prefabricated enamel steel houses developed after World War II by Chicago industrialist and inventor Carl Strandlund. And it's in response to the housing shortages. It's too early to be tongue-tied like this already. Housing shortages that we're experienced after World War II. They were and still are incredibly low maintenance and extremely durable homes for that modern family on the go who doesn't have the time or want to deal with the maintenance and upkeep that maybe a traditional home might come with. While the Lustron Homes and the Lustron Company was the most heavily capitalized and industrialized of all of the firms that received federal funding during the 1940s and 50s to build homes to address that crisis, it didn't go very swimmingly. It did not last very long. It did not produce the numbers of homes that they had planned for. And the company only existed from 1946 to 1950. But in that small, brief amount of time, they made a big impact on our built environment and in our history. So obviously why we're here tonight to talk about them. Before we get into the Lustrons themselves, let's just go over kind of that background information of how we get to prefab housing to solve that housing shortage after World War II. As we talked about on our first lecture of Modern WNY this week on Tuesday, our Modern Housing lecture, which is available on Facebook if you missed it and you want to rewatch it, or if you just want to keep watching it, you know, I make jokes. I'm sort of funny. I'm sure it's a great time to rewatch. I hope my mother has rewatched it several times already. I'll stop talking now. So we learned in that lecture that we have a housing shortage, that's a housing crisis that starts during the Great Depression and then really snowballs into a true crisis when all of the GIs are returning after World War II. In that lecture, we talked about the different federal programs that the government created to address that. And so the major way that they did that was by creating a new house plan for an economical, compact, small house that could be easy to build and cheap to pay for. And so we see pictures, examples of that house, which is called the minimal traditional, right? And so they designed this new type of house plan to fit this need and create a mortgage program to support the construction and purchase of those homes. In addition to that kind of direct intervention, the federal government is also pursuing options by targeting the manufacturing community and trying to get different types of solutions for housing crisis through manufacturing. And so that's how we get to the Lustrons. It's not the first time that the federal government turns to prefab housing to address their needs for building and construction. During World War II, there was a lot of prefab building going on to meet the needs of the Army. I think the most well-known and recognized example of prefab housing is what you see before you, the Quonset Huts. They are just large metal rounded tube buildings, super easy with corrugated metal to pop together wherever you need them, take them down easily. The Army and the military use those quite extensively during the war, and then certainly was popular in other industries outside of the war. So that prefab manufacturing community met the needs during the war effort so well, they turned back to them once the housing crisis happened. In 1946, there was legislation that allowed the granting of surplus war materials, so surplus supplies, to go towards the construction of prefab housing for residential use. And not just the materials and the steel that would be needed, but also to allocate the wartime plants that are no longer building planes or ammunition to be able to retool them to build these prefab homes. How were they able to do that, and in what way were they able to create that entire infrastructure of getting materials and locations and also money, startup capital to these companies? It was through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. So that was an independent agency that was created actually in the Great Depression under the Hoover administration to, streamline getting money to banks to try to solve the problems of the Depression. It was then picked up by Roosevelt and made a much larger part of his New Deal than it was before he was president, or part of the Recovery Act before he was president, and then it continued into the wartime era. It was officially closed in 1957. And so this separate agency of the government was in charge of distributing all of this funding to get these plants started started and allocating those supplies and locations. By the end of that agency's lifetime, they were responsible for distributing 50 billion, billion with a B, dollars to different industries to get the country back on track and recover from the Great Depression and then the war as well. This next slide, here's some images that I found that I thought was super cute. Just the ladies, these are staff at the RFC calculating loan interest amounts is what the caption said at the Library of Congress. And I just think it's a pretty great photograph. Obviously, just from their shoes alone, you can tell that this, and their hair, it's from a little bit earlier in the lifetime of the RFC. And then a cartoon showing how this was one of the programs that Hoover instituted to try to break the cycles of the Depression. There we go. So we have the RFC, we have them in charge of this humongous pot of money and really just a lot of power to take over and redistribute materials and factories towards the recovery effort. And so here comes in Carl Strandlund. I don't know why I can never say his name. It's just a weird combination of vowels that don't sound like they're going to say the word that they're going to say. This is the man we're talking about, this handsome devil. He's born in Sweden. He's a Swede in 1888. He immigrates to the United States as a child. By the 1920s, he has a very successful career in industry, eventually becoming the president of the Oliver Farm Equipment Company, you know, that famous company. By 1930, he is the president of the Chicago Vitreous Enamel Product Co. And so they make enameled steel panels for any number of uses, but from refrigerator doors to storefront panels as well. That was really popular in the 30s and 40s to have a really art modern enameled front entrance to your business. In 1946, when this money starts coming through, he travels to Washington to lobby the federal government to get some of that money so that Chicago Vitreous can build steel enameled gas stations. And the federal government is like, no, we don't really need gas stations, we need houses. So he goes back to Chicago and gets the team together and comes up with this model, this idea for building these houses, and comes up with the plan and brings it back to Washington. And they're like, yes, we want this, we will fund this. They come back and it's going to be under their own business name. And then it switches that it's going to be run under an affiliated company name called Porcelain Products Company. But soon thereafter, they change the name and officially name this endeavor the Lustron Corporation. The word lustron coming from the material lucertite, I guess it depends on how you like to pronounce use. It's a type of material that's used as part of that porcelain enameling process. That word lustron was actually trademarked as early as 1937 because these steel enamel panels had already been used in construction, most notably White Castle hamburger joints. Those, you know, the old buildings they used to have that looked like little castles, they were enameled steel panels on the outside. And also during that time period, Standard Oil, their company standard gas station, had enamel paneling on it as well. So the name Lustron wasn't completely brand new when they renamed the company to be Lustron Company. So they come up with this plan to build housing and they go back to the RFC and ask for the money and they're granted it. You see in this article on the left-hand side that it says $12.5 million is what's awarded. What actually is awarded in that first loan disbursement is $15 million to them to get set up, and not to get set up. By the end of the lifetime of the Lustron Company, they actually end up getting $37 million from the federal government. $37 million in 1940s is a crap ton of money, like an insane amount of money. They are one of the corporations that get the most money out of the RFC during this time period. They not only get actual just cash money, they also are given this factory that we see behind, in this photograph where there are the different executives standing in front of. The factory that they ultimately use in Columbus, Ohio, is a former Curtiss Wright warplane factory. So once it was done making planes for the war effort, it was given to the Lustron company for their manufacturing of the panels. As part of the agreement in getting that federal funding, they promised to make 100 houses a day with the goal of 15,000 houses in the first year. So that's a lot of houses, which seems like a fair equal amount considering how much money they are given. Spoiler alert, they only ever get about 2,500 houses out the door. 2,500 the entire time that they exist. So they never really meet their promises at all. But they tried quite hard. There's lots of drama, not just with the loans and in kind of the financial side and proper management of those funds. But there's a lot of factory issues. And then independent of those, there's still a lot of steel shortages happening. So even with these companies who are getting the RFC loans being prioritized to get those scarce materials, there's still shortages and runs on those materials. So they've caused a lot of delays in their production, obviously. So they get working, 1946, they get that chunk of change, they get working on completing the prototype house. And so the first complete unit that is built in Hinsdale, Illinois in the fall of 1946. It's just a simple 1-story, 5-room building, and it's built purposefully so it would be so simple so it could be repeated easily. According to a memo in the Lustron Corporation, it took 200,000 hours to design and complete the plans for that prototype. There's only one prototype that was physically built. So that's a lot of hours into that. It was called the Esquire. It was a 5-room building, as you see this floor plan in front of you. So it was a 2-bedroom house that had a living room, it says a dining room, but it's really more of a dinette, and a kitchen, and then a utility laundry space. Obviously a bathroom as well. This basic 2-room design was created by Roy Blass and Morris Beckman. Blass and Beckman were Chicago-based architects who were former draftsmen with the architectural firm Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill, more commonly known as SOM. They are an incredibly influential and prominent architecture firm, not just in that time period, but still to this day. So these weren't just average Joe Schmoes off the street. They were quite trained gentlemen. The prototype was very, very similar, and basically this floor plan that we see in front of us, there are only a few slight tweaks that are done after that prototype is completed. And once those tweaks are completed, that then becomes the first model available to the public, which was called the Winchester. There are in total 3 models that eventually get designed: the Winchester, the Newport, and the Meadowbrook. We'll look at them again in a little bit more detail in a couple more slides. So they developed this prototype in 1946, but then a bunch of drama happens. Like I was saying, mismanagement and just kind of chaoticness in the organization themselves. The factory isn't working the way they think or want it to work. And with steel shortages, nothing actually gets produced once they finish the prototype up until 1948. So for 2 years after the prototype was completed, there was no movement, there was no production of houses. Looking back on those numbers now, we know that those 2 years were the height of the housing crisis in the 40s. And so they really, really missed out on taking advantage of all of those sales that they could have done if they had gotten their crap together and got the factory to run how it was supposed to. So definitely by missing those 2 years, dramatically negatively impacted their ability to fulfill their promises to the federal government. That first house that gets completed and off the assembly lines ready for sale to the public, it is done in November of 48. So quite late in the year that finally gets completed. So here is a great promotional still of an interior of that first model of Lustrons, the Winchester model. While there's three models, they really vary just in the placement of the windows and the door and a few other little tiny extra details that some have and some don't. But the essential elements of the Lustron house are universal to all the models. And so that is that it's erected and intended to be built without a basement and on a flat concrete slab. Again, it's a one-story house, no 1.5s. It's just a straight one-story house with a gabled roof. The exterior and interior are built out of steel enameled panels that are bolted to a steel structural framing. The interior walls to create the different rooms are also made out of steel framing with those steel paneling installed onto it. And those interior wall frames are then bolted to that concrete slab. We saw that picture of the outside on the previous slides where the outside panels are those perfectly square panels, where on the interior they are vertical panels through there. So again, kind of mimicking what might be a paneling on a traditional home, similar to that here, even though it's metal. And it's also interesting to note the flooring in this one, as the Winchesters, most of the I keep saying Winchester, but it's Westchester. The Westchesters would come with a specific type of linoleum or asbestos tile flooring on there. The other models, you could choose and work with the builder to put a different type of flooring if you like, but this is definitely a typical flooring for this model. Next slide. Here's another really great promotional photographs showing what the bathroom would look like. And then that utility laundry room. And I really do like that picture the most because, you know, the whole point is that it's a simple, small house and it's modern. It's the future, but don't worry, you still have the space where your little lady can do the housework things that she needs to do. So I do really love that photograph, making sure the housewives know they have space to iron. It's very, very important. So even though it's steel frame houses of earlier generations, because this isn't the first prefab steel framed house that was available. But earlier examples really struggled with insulation for both hot weather and cold weather. And so with the Lustron, they did try to address those issues and prevent those issues. And so they fixed that with several energy efficient features. So one of the major features is that in addition to that natural thermal break that exists by having the two layers of steel with an air pocket in between that's just created naturally by the construction, the exterior square panels also had fiberglass insulation on the inside of the panels. So it's not just a hollow panel that could get it could get dented, but there was that fiberglass installed on the interior of each panel for extra insulation. And then the other really interesting way that they addressed energy efficiency and heating was through radiant heating on the ceiling. So if I can get this to move, there we go. So here's a really great diagram explaining how that would work. So there is no furnace, there's no radiators, there's no air vents or something in the actual rooms. It's all radiant ceiling heat. So you would have, as you can read on this chart, you would have that furnace in the utility room, that little box of mechanicals above the woman ironing, that would, something made a noise, that would blow hot air into the space above the ceiling and in the roof rafters. And so it would create that void of air would flow through there, and there would be metal sheets that would direct the air movement so that the hot air would circle and navigate through that maze of metal to heat the entire house. So very, very unique, and again, cuts down on the cost of energy and the cost of heating your house in the wintertime. Excellent. Here are some really great archival photographs of, the manufacturing process. So in creating this whole entire endeavor, Carl really and the company looked to the automotive industry for inspiration. So the factory and how they built these pieces was really an assembly line, taking cues from the automotive industry. So having this assembly line of all of the steel panels being constructed and organized. So here is steel panels on the pulley going through. I think they're on their way to getting dipped in the enamel or sprayed with the enamel. Guys stacking the different tiles there. And then that truck carrying an entire house kit in the back, which is pretty cool. And I love how they didn't like try to cover over it, so you didn't see all of those steel pieces and metal pieces. That was one of the things that they were really, really good at, was that PR and getting attention. And that's definitely something they did to get attention. And then here is a great picture that's shared quite often around on the internet. It's an entire house kit, one whole house laid out. So there are 3,000, more than 3,000 pieces in this kit, but that kit would include every single thing that you needed for that house. That must have taken so much time to line up so perfectly. But there are some spots that are not, and I wish I could tweak them, but we can't. It's over. They already did it. And then here is some photographs of the construction process. And so this is a really great one that kind of shows how these steel pieces just clicked into each other. Obviously, there were certain parts of the framing that would have to actually get screwed together or welded together. But the majority of the panels on the interior and exterior really just clicked into that framing and created a skin to form those rooms.
Can you go back just a couple of slides?
Yes.
Was there a question about maybe one more where the ironing?
Oh, the ironing, yeah.
What is the contraption above her head? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, so that's the forced air. So behind her is the water heater. And so this is the machinery that heats the air and is blowing through that system. So that's what that is.
Emma said, Lustron, it's pre-fabulous. Which I like too.
I like that too. Excellent. It's really, and she looks like she's tall, because that room, it's a good ceiling height. I know I'm really tiny. I'm barely 5 feet. My license lies and says that I'm 5'3", but that's not true. And so like it really is high up there. This picture kind of makes it look weird that she could possibly like hit herself on it, but it's quite up there in the ceiling. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about those different models now. So again, the Esquire prototype, there were just some really small changes to, I think it was mostly the width of certain passways in the room, in the house between certain rooms, and just really just like finessing some of those joints and intersections of lines and stuff. But that prototype becomes the first model available to the public, which is the Winchester. It is the most popular. It is the one that was not only the majority of the ones built then, but even currently of what has survived and is still standing, it is definitely the one that's most commonly surviving. And it is identifiable by this cutaway porch, this indented porch that is beneath the main block of the roof. That is the Winchester, with these fabulous kind of square boxed windows that pop out. It is available as a 2-bedroom house, but there is also a 3-bedroom house option as well. And then there were varieties in colors that you could have for the exterior, but they were just set colors. It wasn't any color that you wanted. They came in a maize yellow, a dove gray, a blue, a surf blue, and desert tan, which are just fabulous names. And so I think this one down here, just because of the weird coloring of it, that must be the desert tan that just kind of looks pink because of the tinting of that print.
Christy, we have a question.
Yeah.
Where were most of these built?
They were built all over the country.
That's.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more there, but yeah, they were built all over the country. There's a whole distribution system. We're totally going to get to that. Don't worry. So here is a view of the interior of a Winchester. The biggest difference between the Winchester and the other models is not only that front door porch entry thing that we just saw, that they have this indented porch, but then they also are the ones that have these built-in units. The other two models don't have those. And so these will have in the Winchesters a desk or a vanity, whatever word you want to use for them, but they feature these items, which are really, really nice. And this is a beautiful house that I just found on the internet that have styled it very, very 1950s to go along with the style of the house itself. Here is the Newport. This is the second model that is created. It's created as a cheaper option to the Westchester. So we see here, it's cheaper and smaller. And the way that they're able to make that work is by removing that cutaway porch. And so by taking back that porch space as interior space, they're able to shrink down the model in its entirety. So here we have that floor plan where we've lost the dining room, that little dinette, and now it's just one large room for a dining living room area with a totally enclosed kitchen off of that room. So a little bit shorter, a little bit more compact than the Westchester. The Meadowbrook was basically the same exact design and layout as this Newport one. It was just about 2 feet larger. So just slightly bigger. And it was seen as more of a congruent, cheaper option to the Westchester. So you could decide between the Westchester or the Meadowbrook, or if you really don't need those extra 2 feet, you could choose the smaller one that was the Newport. But the Meadowbrook was introduced late in 1949, right before the company just kind of implodes. So they don't even actually believe that any Meadowbrooks got built. So really all of the 2,500 Lustrons that ended up getting constructed, all of them were the Westchesters and the Newports. So while obviously everyone's house that they buy, every Westchester, every Newport is going to look and have the same format, there's ability to customize within reason. And so that customization would include buying extra packets, extra kits to change out different elements. So you could buy a kit to add on storm windows or screens to these windows, to buy a storm door or a screen door. They had kits to add steel Venetian blinds to the windows. They also offered a picture hanging kit. Again, this is metal. These are metal walls. You cannot, should not nail in something to hang up a picture. So they made their own picture hanging kits to help you do that and decorate. So and then they would also, sorry.
I was like, so that's, okay, accessorizing with the Lustron.
Accessorizing.
That's just
I thought of that, and I would have put that. I would have made a cute heading. Accessorizing.
It's like a Barbie house. It's like a dream house. You're just have to keep buying more kits.
It is the Barbie house version.
It's very smart monetarily. We have a Lustron house owner in here, Erin.
Oh yeah.
And Emma asked, since there aren't many left, would it be possible to build one today with the full floor plans, or is it trademarked to where that is impossible? Do you know that?
Well, I mean, it's possible to build them, and we're going to talk at the end of the presentation of an example of a homeowner who purchased a Lustron that was someplace else. They dismantled it and moved it to a new location. So that is happening often, and there's even I don't know where I put it, but there is even a handbook that was produced helping current, for today, how do you dismantle and and put it back together, not just the way that they told you to do it in the original handbooks, but to fit modern things and to fit correct certain issues that might have existed then that we can fix now. But obviously, I mean, the floor plans and the information is out there. It's all on the internet. Anyone could find them. If you found those pieces, you could definitely reconstruct that. As far as making, like if you're starting from scratch and you don't even have any Lustron parts at all, I guess theoretically you could manufacture all of those. The company does not exist anymore. As far as the copyright, that is an excellent question that I don't have an answer to. So like, even if, you've had like a humongous, what are those crazy printers that like print in plastic? Like
a 3D printer for a Lustron house?
Yeah, I'm sure if you had the plans, like I don't see why that wouldn't happen, but trademark wise, I have no idea what the status of that would be. I mean, I know it's patented, so I don't know. That's a fabulous question.
It says Mike, because you can just go to lustronlocator.com, which is their website. And Julie also owns a Lustron. There's just so many owners. All right.
Well, I hope I talk about things correctly. And then the last, another customization package that you can buy is an attic fan. So again, depending on what your climate is and what your issues are, you could buy an extra fan to help circulate that hot air in the wintertime, or to help circulate the cool air and help with circulation in the summertime. By 1949, the Lustron company is also selling, as part of that customization packets, garages and breezeways. And that's why we have the picture in front of us. This is a Winchester Deluxe model. So for each of those models, the Winchester and the Newport, they had a regular and a deluxe that was a little bit larger and a little bit extra things on the inside. So Winchester Deluxe that bought the garage package and the breezeway package to create this awesome little compound before us. There were two types of garage packages. So there was the Model G1, that was just a 1-car garage, and then the Model 2G, that was a 2-car garage. And the essential way of putting together that garage was the same as the main house, but the difference was that the garage kit just gave you the panels, and that to build the garage, you still needed to make your own wood framing to put those, install those tiles onto. So the garage kits didn't give you the steel framing like they would with the main house. That also allowed you to really customize that garage. So you could buy either model, you could buy extra panels and maybe make that garage longer if that's what you needed, or do other weird, funky things that you wanted to do with that. So it really allowed you to customize that. And then I think the Breezeway package is definitely the coolest package to have, because again, we've only seen kind of a handful of pictures of the Lustrons, but you have this main door here where the porch is, and then there is a back door where the kitchen is. So this Breezeway connects that back door from the kitchen into the garage. And this house is in Indiana. I forget if I mentioned that. So the delivery and the distribution system, just as he had modeled the production on the automobile industry, he modeled the distribution system on the automobile industry. So he saw ideally what Lustrons was going to be as coming out with a new model every so often to entice new potential owners, but also to entice those already people who already owned Lustrons, who see, oh, that new fancy model, I rather have that. And so trying to create that same house envy as they created with car envy, wanting the newest year, the newest model. And so that was the vision of the creation of it. And so then to facilitate the distribution, they had registered dealers to distribute and buy these, just like you would have a car dealership, you had a Lustron dealership. And so what we have here on the screen is the Niagara County dealer, La Duca Builders. So they are the builders that are here for Western New York. There is no registered dealer for Buffalo or Erie County. The next closest dealers, there's one in Jamestown, and then there is one in Olean, which seems far out of the way, but definitely lovely to have little Lustrons out in Olean and out in Cattaraugus County. And in getting these dealers to sign up, by May of 1949, there are 43 dealers across the country signed up to sell these homes. You had to go to that dealer to buy the homes. They also gave the dealers guidebooks and instructions of how to market and what to do to get people to come in, just like they do with car dealerships. So they would give them baseline advertisements that they could alter and tweak to be printed in their local newspapers, like advertisements like the one we're seeing before us. They gave them instructions and guidance and outlines of how to create public demonstrations of the house. A lot of the dealers, at the urging and encouragement of Lustron, had their show houses. So they went and built this example house, this show house, so that people could tour it and see what's going on and what is this weird thing called Lustron. And so here is that advertisement open to the public. Come tour this brand new the house that America is talking about. That was on Roselle Avenue and DeVoe Street. So the majority of the dealers did kind of focus on these types of PR campaigns, to have that show house, that example house for people to come into. If it wasn't built within a neighborhood with the goal of then selling it after that show period, there was also examples of dealers setting up and building houses at, like county fairs or in shopping center parking lots, going where tons of people would be and showing them and exposing them to that Lustron house. So here is the advertisement saying that beginning this week in 1949, 48, I forget what year this ad was from, I'm sorry, to go tour this house on Roselle and DeVoe. And they also partnered with Cornell and Daggett, which was a Niagara Falls furniture company. And they designed the furniture. They did the interior decorating for that house for the public showing. So here's an advertisement that that Cornell and Daggett put, explaining that and showcasing how they were connected to this. I do just want to go back to this ad. This ad, I reformatted it so it would fit on the screen. This was a half-page ad in the newspaper. This was a humongous advert. So this isn't a sleepy little campaign to get people to come here. This was a huge PR campaign. And here is that house on Roselle and DeVoe. Here's a little, so they had like the big advertisements and articles in the regular section of the newspaper. And then here is a little advert that was in like the house for sale section of the paper, again, to make sure they're catching every eyeball that might be interested in coming and seeing this house. I apologize for the blurriness of this picture because currently, these bushes are quite large and you can't really see the house with current photographs of it. So this is an older photograph to just give you that really good viewpoint of it. It's a Winchester model. You see that with the cutaway porch here. It's on the corner of the street, obviously. So this is facing that way. And then here is that back door that would go towards the garage or the backyard. So in addition to those neighborhood level, the small community level, demonstrations of and public showings of Lustron, they also did really big dramatic PR events. And so Lustron coordinated with 100 cities across the country to have a Lustron built in a very prominent location. And so these photographs are actually from New York City. They built a Lustron house in the middle of Midtown Manhattan on the Avenues of America on 6th Avenue and 52nd Street. So just right down the street from Rockefeller Center and the Museum of Modern Art, right in the thick of everything, downtown New York. And they built a frickin' Lustron for people to come and take a look and experience, again, what America is talking about. Yes. Let me... Excellent. So that goes that way for quite a while, and not quite a while. I mean, they start building houses in 48 is when they first start building houses. They're chugging along to 1949 and they're having money problems. And so they try to get further funding from the federal government and they are denied. So here are just kind of a smattering of newspaper articles just chronicling that last year of drama where they're trying to get more money. In trying to get more money, that opens the door to a lot of issues that the company is having and things that are seen as mismanagement. Again, I said that they ended up getting $37 million. And so because of this sheer amount that they got, there had to be some sort of oversight by the federal government. There needed to be hearings and testimony given to explain themselves for all this money that they got. Just for reference, so they got $37 million. $1 million in 1946 money would equal 15 million today. So that's 1 to 15 ratio for $1 million. So again, it's an astronomical amount of money that they were given by the federal government. So in March of 1950, there's a hearing before a Senate subcommittee on banking and currency regarding specifically the issues that were had by those dealers and the factory to try to establish, are the issues that this company are having because they're not doing a good job at selling it, or the people don't want to buy these houses, or is the issue with Lustron? And so through the testimony given at that hearing, it is really made clear and conveyed by those dealers across the country that they have a huge demand, that people are pre-ordering and are interested, more and more people signing up every day to buy these houses. It's the supply side. It's the factory is not staying to the commitments of getting these houses out to the dealers. A total, by 1950, we have over 200 dealers across the country. And so for that March 1950 hearing that happens, a total of 220 dealers send in testimony via telegram to explain their experience selling these Lustron houses. And again, looking at that testimony, overwhelmingly, these dealers are saying, I built this many houses so far, but I got this many houses in line, this many owners on a waiting list. We're ready to do this. So then it was clear that the issue was with the company itself. Another issue within that that's kind of amplified and highlighted during that hearing process was the issues with the cost as well. So again, the reason the federal government is throwing all this money at this endeavor is not just to get these houses out, but to make sure that they're affordable houses. So by the government footing the bill for a lot of this setup money and stuff, then they shouldn't have to pass that cost on to the owners. When Lustron started, and with most other prefab housing companies of that time period, the goal was to produce houses that were around $7,000 or $8,000 final cost to that homeowner. And that is because that was kind of the going rate for the equally sized, small, traditionally built suburban house. If we talk about Levittown in Long Island, the very famous suburban development, kind of the epitome of that tract housing to meet the housing need of returning GIs, those houses in this time period are getting sold for $8,000 or less. So they need to stay competitive with those houses. Through this testimony and through other events too, it's clear that by the time everything is said and done, because of the delays, because of the drama at the factory, it's ending up costing homeowners $10,000 to $12,000 for these homes. So even though there are people who want them, there is also issues with, we don't want them to pay that much money for these houses. So again, the hearings happen. There's also a lot of drama and separate hearings that are done, which relate to this article down here with the photo of Roy down here, a Detroit industrialist, there was a lot of mismanagement of funds. Maybe not a lot, but there was mismanagement of funds using whether it's Lustron money or federal money to, pay forward and make donations to key individuals to try to fix their issues in trying to get more loans or to try to get through different approval processes. So there was a little bit of trying to grease the wheel down in Washington, and they definitely were caught, or their attempts were found out, and so that didn't look well on the Lustron company. So unfortunately, none of this gets resolved. There's no further funding injected into this company without another massive loan by the federal government. There's just no way for the company to continue, and they file for bankruptcy. In 1950, the process obviously takes quite a long time, and the company is officially donezo by 1953. So very short time for this company. Carl, it sort of ruins his life as well, unfortunately. He had some of his own money in that. These are loans, again, it's not grants from the federal government. These are loans. They were supposed to be paid back. So through that bankruptcy process, Carl and other executives really did see issue with that. There's an interview that Carl's widow does in the 80s where she kind of details how they lost their house as well, which is rather unfortunate. He continues working in other areas for the rest of his life, and he actually he passes away in 1974.
Well, Christy.
Yeah, do we have a question?
We have one question.
Yeah.
Are there ever any faults involving major upkeep or repair?
Well, I mean, I think that there definitely is, not necessarily. And again, I am not an official Lustron historian, so I'm sure that there are things that I'm not aware of that probably answer your question better. But what I can think of right off the top of my head is that this is just such a new material for someone to be living in. It's all steel. So I think that there's a lot of issues that happen with the houses in that time period and today. But many of those issues are because people are not repairing it correctly for that type of material. They're treating it like it would be a wood house. They're treating it like it is a different, more traditional material and not metal. So they're doing things to it that are going to permanently damage that metal. And then you have a problem with it forever. My favorite example, I mean, the whole point of it being enameled steel was to be clean, the cleanliness aspect of it, you just spray the exterior with a hose and you've cleaned it. You never have to paint it. It's just permanently that way ever. There is a Lustron in the city of Albany where a previous owner put vinyl siding on the outside. I have no freaking idea how they even put on that vinyl siding, but there's holes in those steel panels somewhere. I mean, there has to be. So again, I think a lot of the issues that we see now looking and inspecting these houses are definitely just because of misinformation and bad treatments of the materials. I think there were also a lot of issues with the heating system, the forced air. But yeah, that's what I gotta say about that. Good question. Definitely one that needs further research to give a better answer. So now let's take a look at some examples that we have here in the region. So this one is another Niagara Falls one. This is on South Avenue. And so here is a current picture of this Winchester model. I think it's just a Winchester 2. It's a non-deluxe. And then here is the advertisement selling that house. The advertisement was from 1953. Here is a Jamestown one on 226 Hall Avenue, which I love this one. It's another Winchester, because you can see by the porch. I love this one because of those contrasting colors they selected for the exterior. So I think a lot of the ones that we've seen so far in the slideshow have been a single color on the exterior and then a white accent color for the windows and doors, or the cream. It's not really exactly a white. But for this one, they chose that maize yellow as the alternating color. So it really just makes that blue color pop in a way that is just so mid-century fabulous. The other amazing thing about this Jamestown one is that you can go explore it on your own. And by explore, I mean drive by it peacefully from the public right of way. When you take our Drive Yourself mod self-guided driving tour, it is one of the houses featured in that tour. So you should go to our website after this is over and buy one of those keepsake brochures. Thank you. Tia will put a link in the comments. And then the last house I want to talk to you guys about is this one that is down in Eden, New York, obviously. It was actually originally built in Westfield. And this is the house that I briefly mentioned earlier that had been built in Westfield. It had reached its end of its life, being able to stay in its original location, and it was put up for sale and purchased by a lovely couple, Joyce and Keith, and they dismantled it and moved it to its new home in Eden. They are chronicling their work to not just to put it back together, but in repairing and restoring this home as their new family home in their blog, Lustron or Bust. Me and one of my coworkers, Tabitha, we got to tour this house recently and learn about their process. But you know, I'm going to touch on some things here, but certainly go check out their blog and follow along. They purchased it in 2016, but due to some, is there a question, Tab? Oh, I thought you were interrupting, Tia, sorry. So they purchased it in 2016. They had some delays and they weren't able to start dismantling and moving it until 2017. And so they've now moved it to Eden. As you see, it's constructed. They finished all the major structural construction projects. And so now they're just finishing the interior paneling and floor installation, and then are going to be moving to the exterior restoration and landscape projects. So again, the owners that are doing this, their names are Joyce and Keith, and they are uniquely suited for this. Again, I mentioned earlier with that question about building one today, there's a lot of resource and a lot of help out there to help current Lustron owners with just normal maintenance and upkeep and just in a conventional way, but for dismantling and repairing and doing larger structural projects. There are manuals and lots of information out there, and also several really great and active Facebook groups and other online communities of Lustron owners. I think some of you who are Lustron owners that are here tonight saw the posting through those boards and Facebook groups. So there definitely is support, but Joyce and Keith are a little bit ahead of the crowd in doing this project. Keith is an engineer, so that definitely helped them in a way to make sure that this was going the right way and putting it back together. And Joyce, in her professional life, is a porcelain restorer in an art environment and an arts and crafts kind of environment. So having that knowledge and understanding of porcelain definitely helps when they're trying to repair damages and issues with the porcelain tiles. You know, when you have something, I think we've all done that where we think we know how we're going to fix something and we take it apart and then we try to put it back together and it never goes back together the way it's supposed to. So it definitely is challenging. And so that's why it's kind of fun to go follow along on their blog. Let's take some looks at pictures of the interior. So again, it's a Winchester model because we see that porch. When you walk into that front door, you have the dinette to your left, which is this area right here with that built-in partition and china cabinet that separates the dinette from the kitchen area. Please pardon my little 1950s lady that I put on this image. I promised Joyce that I wouldn't put pictures of her. She didn't want herself in the photographs, and I accidentally caught her in this photo, but it was just such a good picture. I didn't want to use it, so we are using this lady from a sewing kit pattern to make that skirt. So I have that if anyone is interested in making their own flower poodle skirt. So this is looking from the dinette into the kitchen. And then here is the kitchen itself. The Lustrons would have originally have come with you know, here are those original cabinets that we see on the up on the wall. It would have also have had a kitchen counter and sink that was part of the unit. Unfortunately, this house, they no longer had that for their unit, but they were able to find really, really fabulous oven and stove and refrigerator to get into this, and then be able to find a salvaged, you know, a vintage sink unit to put in there that really does complement the style and layout of the kitchen. Here is the living room. So we're the doorway is like right here in that mirror, and that is me and Tabitha being goofballs. You can see where, you can see where they are in the process. They've pretty much finished all of the interior panel installation. They're just finishing up the floor, and then certainly kind of those last step trim type things. Here is the bathroom. They did have a fair number of the original fixtures in the bathroom survive or be able to easily find comparable replacements for it. So it wasn't that bad of a repair, you know, restoration project. Looking online, I've seen a lot of Lustrons where, you know, the bathroom is usually the first thing that gets that modern, that remodel, you know, after 10 years of owning the Lustron, it's the bathroom that gets the remodel first. So there aren't that many that have a perfect bathroom left, but they've done a really great job at trying to keep it that. And something that they're doing that's different and interesting is that they have they reconstructed the Lustron on a foundation with a basement. So the land that they are putting the house on has a little valley that kind of goes, a little hill area that goes down to a stream. And so they built the foundation into that area so they could have that basement, that those doors will then open into this really cute little valley area. It's a really, really pretty piece of land out in Eden. But again, we talked about it's a one-story house. Lustrons are one story. So there was not an opening in the house for this basement. So they had to install a stairwell, and they needed to cut out where that stairwell would go. And so where they ended up putting it, which is the most logical way and really the only way to do this, they installed it in that utility room, in that laundry space. So the picture that is that you see here is from their blog. That is taken from where that refrigerator is in the previous photo, kind of looking, and you can see the top of where they built in that stairwell, where they cut through the steel flooring, or well, there is no floor, but they have that opening there and used extra panels to kind of create that wall of the stairwell. The basement isn't completed yet, but they're going to have it tiki themed. So I'm very excited to go back and have some cocktails in the future. And then the last thing to talk about tonight is the preservation of Lustron houses. There are a lot, you know, because the Lustron received all this money from the federal government, because it had such a large PR campaign, and just because of its history, there is still a lot of information out there about Lustrons. And in Ohio, the Ohio Historical Society and other institutions were really, really wonderful at retaining and keeping all of that documentation as well. There is a Lustron house built in the museum in Ohio. So there is a lot of information from that end, but we know a lot about what Lustrons have remained, have survived, where they are, and what condition or integrity level they have right now. And that's because there have been a lot of preservation projects around Lustron, namely the completion of what's called a multiple property designation form. If you were with us yesterday for the memorial pool, we were talking about how we don't really know much about those Bintz pools because there haven't been this national survey to inventory what ones were built, where are they now, are they standing, and just get all of that documentation about the pools. But with Lustron, there have been many states that have completed these multiple property designation forms. What is a multiple property designation form? It is a document that will research a particular theme and collection of resources that are connected by a particular theme, and do the full history of those resources, and just the full context surrounding those resources, create an inventory of all of those resources. And then that document, once completed, is kind of a framework towards completing National Register nominations for those. Why would you want to list houses on the resources on the National Register of Historic Places? For those who are unaware, the National Register of Historic Places is our federal government's official listing of the individual sites, districts, structures, or objects that are deemed worthy of preservation for their historic significance. So we want to list things on the National Register because, yes, it's an honorary designation, but it opens the gateway to financial incentives. So it opens the door to tax credits and grant programs, right? The National Register of Historic Places does not provide a protection on a resource. It just it can't prevent demolition or save a building from being endangered, but because of this honorary designation, it opens the door to financial incentives that would help turn around a house that might be on that path towards demolition or demolition by neglect. And so that's what's been done in several states. They've created this multiple property designation, inventoried all of the Lustrons in their state, and it creates that process that allows individual homeowners to list their homes on the National Register, where without this form, it would be very difficult for them individually to get listed on the National Register. What you see here, this is the cover sheet of the New York State multiple property designation form that was completed in 2007. I have the reason I have such an affinity and wanted to talk about Lustrons, not just because we have them here in Western New York, but the consultant that prepared that study, her name is Kim Alvarez, her firm Landmark Consulting. She did that project with grant money that was raised, and the project that was started by Historic Albany Foundation in Albany, New York. And I actually worked at Historic Albany Foundation during this time period and was witness and kind of got to see what Kim was doing and be a part in a way with this project. If you actually look at this black and white photograph of one of the Lustrons that have been listed on the National Register, that is Kim standing there on the porch holding her oldest child, who just started his first week of high school. So that's how much time has passed since this survey was completed. The reason that Historic Albany Foundation was the organization that kind of took that step to create this document was because in Albany, there is a street that has, I think it's 6 Lustron houses. And that's what this picture is at the bottom, this kind of pixelated picture. Sorry for the quality. But there's a little gaggle of Lustrons that were built as kind of the showplace house. One developer, that the Albany dealer, built all of them there on that street. And so they wanted to list that street, those houses, on the National Register. And so by doing this multiple property designation form, they were able to do that for their resources, but then they opened the door for any Lustron in the state to be able to list on the National Register. Since 2007, only 2 National Register nominations have been produced in New York State because of that document. So the Germain Street Historic District Lustrons that we see on the bottom are listed on the National Register. And then this Lustron on the top, the black and white photograph, is in Glenville, New York. And so again, coming back to the preservation of Lustrons and to ensure that they stay in our built environment, because I think that we all recognize the interesting and wonderful significance, and also the energy efficiency and great reasons to keep it from that financial environmental way. We as a preservation community really should do more effort and really work towards trying to get more of these listed, because then it opens up those financial incentives for those owners to be able to offset the costs of upkeep and maintaining their homes. And with that,
Christy,
yes, questions?
Just to tack on to your preservation point, Emma pointed out that there is a Winchester Lustron in Ohio, and the Ohio History Museum is fixing, they have it where you can explore it in real life, just like you would to go see it, in case anybody wants to go see that.
Yeah,
And
in the museum, like you can even see pictures, like they just rebuilt it inside the museum. It's pretty awesome.
yeah, and then the Carlisle Area Historical Society in Iowa is in the process of restoring one as well, and it will be the only one open to the public. And then just a quick question from Carl says, what are the roofing materials?
It is the same porcelain tiles.
Okay, and then Emma asks this question, I don't know this game. It says, how do you feel about Fallout 4 bringing the Lustron house to new sets of eyes and new generations with how they are set in the game? I've never seen this game, and she says that's how she found out about Lustrons in the first place.
What is it called? Say it again.
Fallout 4, aptly named, I think, for this kind of house, because that's what it makes me think about. But
I have no idea what that is. I'm gonna
the
second we're over.
if anybody here is listening and knows about that, please get into the chat, talk to Emma, because maybe you have something to say about it.
No, I have no idea. So that's what's great about Lustron, is that it is a little bit more visible. The history is more accessible than other little weird things that happened during that same time period. So there is the opportunity to do a lot of interesting things as those historical societies and museums have done to commemorate, but then also from the preservation community, things that we can do to ensure that the ones that people are living in continue to be homes for people. Because that's the point. It's great and wonderful that more historical societies are seeing this trend in their communities and doing something to commemorate it in their institutions. But from us as preservationists, we want to not only preserve the character of these houses and how they fit into our neighborhoods and support the architectural diversity in our neighborhoods. From an environmental and financial standpoint, these are cheap, easy to maintain houses, and whatever issues that might exist with those houses, now, so many years in the future, we have better materials and mechanics to address any of those issues, so we can make it even more maintenance free and even more energy efficient and easy to live in. We don't want to be throwing away things for the sake of throwing them away. We should be trying to reuse all of our homes, whether they are built of wood or built of steel. Any other questions other than telling us what this game is?
They're talking about it. They're talking about the game. Tabitha, thank you, Tabitha.
Well, we can have that conversation.
I'm going to play this game now, so I don't know.
We will allow that conversation to happen in the chats. I will tie this up and wait and see if anyone else has any more Lustron questions that I'm capable of answering. So like we said in the start, this is our final lecture of Modern WNY for 2020. Bittersweet end, but I've drank half a glass of tequila so far, so I've had a lovely time. I don't know about you. The other two lectures, in addition to this one, will be on Facebook that you can enjoy anytime that you wish. And then while the Modern WNY week is over, Modern WNY can live in your heart and mind always if you purchase our 2 self-guided tours. So here is our Delaware Acres self-guided walking tour, which takes you through the neighborhood just north of Delaware Park here in the city of Buffalo, to explore the mid-century homes that were constructed there, in between the kind of grand mansions of the 1920s and teens that were already in that neighborhood. And then we have our Drive Yourself Mod regional driving tour that takes you to 14 modern masterpieces across the area. And with that, I'll see if there are any last questions for me.
Just one more.
Yeah.
From our Facebook. How were they insulated?
So yeah, so like I said, they were insulated in 2 different ways. So there is just the thermal barrier that is created by the trapped air in between the exterior steel panels and the interior steel panels. So just like low tech, the air itself creates a pocket of insulation. And then on the interior of the exterior panels, the inside of it had fiberglass insulation in those. So it wasn't a complete wall of insulation like you might have in a home. It was probably like the equivalent of rolling a roll of insulation in between your studs, but instead of being a full sheet in a stud, it's in the back of each panel.
Okay. I was wrong. We have another question. No, I love questions.
I ran through those slides quick, so yeah.
What is the time limit on the exterior finish? Does it ever need to be refreshed in some way?
Well, yes, it definitely does need to have some upkeep to it and some repairs to it. So here is the one that was in Westfield and moved to Eden, and Tabitha might need to fill us in on the funny story, but I believe like some event happened that made a lot of this damage to the steel panels on the gable end right here. But you can see that just natural wear, just regular weather over 50 years is going to cause some damage to something. So you can see some moderate, not even moderate, some light damage issues with this exterior. There's also some spots on here where people installed or switched out, like the light fixtures or other elements that would have been on the exterior with different ones. So by doing that, they created more holes on it. So then you have actual holes that need to be repaired. But if we look at this one from Niagara Falls on South Ave, we can see a significant amount of lost of the porcelain enamels on this house right here on the corner and up here in the fascia on the edge of that. There are definitely ways to be able to repair that. I cannot tell you how to do that. I in theory in my brain can see the process happening. I cannot articulate it to you. I apologize. But yeah, I mean, nothing is a permanent, except for plastic. Every other material is going to have some sort of expiration date on that finish ending. But as you see from these photographs from around the region, it's a pretty long time that these can last. Anything else? Next.
Nothing.
All right.
It always feels tentative. You never know, right?
Well, friends, here in Zoom and on Facebook, I've had a lovely time this week sitting alone in my apartment talking blankly to the little green dot on my laptop. I really, really thank you so much for participating in this. For being virtual, for being kind of every moment of us in the office planning this and putting this together, kind of not even sure if we're going to move forward with the event this year. You guys have just really rallied and really responded so wonderful to this year. We really are very appreciative of your support of Modern WNY. We are already starting plans for next year. So make sure if you are here on Zoom, you registered online, so we have your contact information. So you definitely will be getting information about next year's festivities. But for those of you watching us on Facebook, make sure to head to preservationbuffaloniagara.org to sign up for our mailing list. Or if you are not a member and you have had a lovely time listening to me gab about Lustrons, consider becoming a member. We are a nonprofit membership organization. We need membership dollars to be able to put on these amazing programs for you. And if there are no other questions, I'm gonna mute myself and turn my video off. And allow other people, if you want to chat about that game further in the chat function. But if there's no more questions, I will let you go and have a lovely rest of your evening and weekend. Thank you, everybody.